For fans, by fans. Section 336, the next generation of Baltimore sports talk.
Today on the show, the Orioles are good. We ask the question, what makes you an Oriole fan? And Bert tells us about the Village down in Orlando.
Section 336.com. Buckle up, birds, be ready to ride. Your host, Matt, Josh, and Bert are ready to fly. Baltimore's best, Section 336, the #1 sports broadcast. Get your fix. What's the news? Let's talk about Buck, our favorite Orioles. What's the latest lineup? Home runs and stolen bases. This is a trip. Stay tuned in at 336.
Hey there, 336ers. We're back for another episode. Now that the Orioles are starting to win, I think it'll be a much funner episode than last week as we were in the midst of a losing streak. But even though Matt is still in Africa, I was able to get Bert on the phone from Disney. Are you at the park now, or what's going on with you?
Unfortunately, we are not at the parks tonight. We're just hanging out at the 55 community where we stay. We're actually going over to the Villages tonight, which anyone who knows anything about Central Florida knows that the Villages is a community best known for the STD capital of the world.
Hold on, is this the Disney Villages, or what is the Villages?
No, it's like a senior community that has their own little town, with shops and ice cream, and everybody drives golf carts everywhere, and they have a little town square with concerts and stuff. But apparently, the elderly folk who moved down there to the village are still quite young at heart, and good for them.
Oh, okay. I guess when you reach an age, you just don't care anymore.
I think that's the case. Yes.
Now, how am I supposed to turn that into Oriole talk?
Josh, you can turn that into Oriole talk because I listened to last week's episode recently, and it was such a downer, except for getting to hear Matt's voice for a little while, which was great. But it's so weird. It's every other week. We are really down on the O's. They lose 3 or 4 straight or something. They lose first place. And then here we are 1 week from today, and we're having a great week. 5-game winning streak Tuesday night with Tillman supposed to start. It's been a great week, Josh.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that our rotation's been good. For some reason, your cell phone's been bad, and you keep dropping off every few words. So I don't know if you can get somewhere with a slightly better connection. But yeah,
I'll move around a bit.
All right, thank you. But you're right. It's the pitching. We've now gone through the rotation, and everyone has had a quality start except Bundy, who went 5 innings, who pitched an outstanding 5 innings. But of course, he's on that pitch limit, so it's acceptable that he didn't get his 6 innings in.
Yeah, he was excellent, and even Gallardo on Monday night threw one of his best outings this season. Didn't get much in terms of run support, but he looked great. I mean, it was against the Colorado Rockies. They don't have a great record, but their lineup is fairly stacked. They got a bunch of 3 guys that hit over 20 home runs so far this year.
Right. Plus, we've seen a little Oriole magic with Nolan Reimold, out of all people, hitting a walk-off, and then Monday night to win where the pitcher missed the ball. That hit by Manny at the end of the game yesterday would have been a double play normally. And ended the inning. Instead, the pitcher misplays it, so then it should be an out at the plate, but then the catcher drops it, so Adam Jones is safe. We've got to thank a little Oriole magic and the rain. The rain had to help that play out a lot for us.
Yeah, it had started raining a little bit on Monday night, is that right?
Yeah, it was raining. It was actually starting to rain pretty good by the time that play happened, it looked like. But it didn't start raining until that 10th inning. So I think I think that helped us out a little bit. I went on. I was going to tell you, I went on Sunday to the game. Took the family to the 1:00 Sunday start, and it was ridiculously hot.
Dugout Club, right?
Yeah, Dugout Club. And see, when I ordered these tickets a while ago before the weather forecast, I said, hey, they've got the option to sit down in the lower level in left field. I've never done that before. Those look like fun seats. It's cheap. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. way too hot. My family was in the seat for maybe one batter, and then they went in the shade.
Wow.
They went and hung out in the concourse and let me stay until the third inning, which is when we all left. Which then gets me to around the fifth inning when Jonathan Scope hits a home run while I'm driving home, and then I get home and watch the replay on my phone to see that his home run lands in my strip of empty seats.
Oh my God. Worst.
Yeah. Not to mention,
you could have had a home run.
I would have had that Jonathan Scope ball because there was no one else in that row but me because the rest of my family was undercover somewhere.
Wow.
So
now, did you get there early enough to get the Palmer jersey though?
Kind of. I got there about an hour early. We're down to one box, and I got a medium Palmer jersey. So it's I can't button it, but I can wear it like open jersey.
Oh, there you go.
So
it's not completely useless.
No, but very close. But also on Sunday, we've got these Trumbo shirts that everyone knows. You can go to section336.com and order a Trumbo shirt, or you can go to Mother's and pick up your own Trumbo shirt. My wife saw someone wearing a Trumbo shirt.
One of our Trumbo shirts?
One of our Trumbo shirts. Yeah.
Ours and Mother's?
Ours and Mother's, but he had the pre-Mother's version. It did not have the Mother's icon on it. It was an orange one, which you can get exclusively from Section 336. So Mandy saw him up in the upper deck and said hi to him. So she did not get a name or anything. So whatever 336er you are, it's cool that you're out there wearing the shirt at the stadium. My dream is to one time see someone actually wearing the Trumbo shirt in person, besides me.
I heard there's a deal if Trumbo hits a home run that day, they go on sale or something.
Yeah. So they're on sale. When Trumbo hits a home run, they're on sale for the rest of the game.
Oh, great.
So we're doing that. And later in today's episode, I will have details about our next night at the Yard on August 20th.
Awesome.
Which is also the Chris Davis bobblehead day.
Very cool.
And bobble dog. I don't know if the dog's head bobbles, but there's a dog on there. And we'll have a special on the website to get a Trumbo shirt with your ticket as well.
Awesome. That's great. And by August 20th, I will be back from Florida by then, I promise.
Yeah, and Matt will be back too. And we will be hopefully still in first place and pushing forward for this playoff run.
Shoot, we're not only in first place right now. We're one game away from having the best record in all baseball.
How ridiculous is that? I saw that today. And what happened to the unbeatable Cubs?
Seriously, yeah, they fell off. It's interesting.
They can't hit the ball. They got shut out by Miguel Gonzalez yesterday.
Oh my gosh.
That's where they.
Well, either the Cubs are falling off, or I've heard that the Chicago White Sox have fixed Miguel Gonzalez.
They have. And did you read the article on what they did to fix him?
Let me guess. It begins with a C and ends in utter.
Yeah, let's just say if Matt wasn't in Africa, we'd be arguing right now about the cutter. Because sure enough, Miguel contributes to the cutter once again.
Wow.
Plus,
and you know what's interesting, Josh?
Yeah.
Going into Tuesday night, we've got Chris Tillman starting night, going for our sixth consecutive win. Just this past Tuesday, you and I were talking about how we needed Chris Tillman to be the stopper to end a 5-game losing streak, and now it's complete opposite. We need him to continue so we can get a 6-game winning streak.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about Tillman? Tillman obviously took a step this year compared to last year, and he improved. And do you know what pitch he's now throwing more than he has in his career?
I don't. Change up?
The cutter.
Oh, is he calling it something else?
He is now throwing the cutter.
Interesting.
And I think it's like 20% of his pitches or something like that is now the cutter.
Well, and if he goes for the win, gets the win tonight, 15 wins would be the tops in all of baseball as well for starting pitchers.
Yeah. Tillman's been outstanding. And
yes.
And it's just been really fun to watch. And tonight we get Kim back in the lineup, who we needed. I mean, our outfield's a little beat up.
Yeah. Kim had a good night in Bowie last night, being Monday night, and yeah, definitely good to have him back in the lineup tonight.
What do you think's going on with Davis? How long can this slump last?
Yeah, he goes through some slumps like this every season, and I haven't gone back to look to compare to it. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just this seems like one of the worst ones he's had in a long time. Yeah,
I think the problem is, I was looking at it a little today, and I think the problem is he's not. He's either striking out, or he's making. When he makes contact, it's a hit, or it's a fielder's choice type situation. Because if you notice, he always has less at bats than everyone else on the team because he's either hitting fielder's choices, he's getting a walk a game, but the strikeouts when he strikes out are ugly strikeouts.
Yeah. It's I've seen him a few of his at bats while we've been here in Florida. I've seen mostly strikeouts, but a walk here and there. I saw him get hit by a pitch the other day.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say it's coming at the best time possible because we're winning despite the slump. You know, it's going to turn around where he's going to get hot, and then everybody else's bats cool off, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and that's the key. Is right now the pitching's hand on things, so it's all right.
Absolutely.
What we need the great Davis in September, October, and I'm hoping that's when we see him.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. He's just saving it for when it counts.
So you saw that Upton signed with the Blue Jays, or he got traded to the Blue Jays.
Yes, yeah, for a couple prospects.
Yeah, one prospect. They're a number 18 prospect.
Okay.
Which I've been told is kind of like a Tanner Scott to us, around the same level.
Okay. Yeah, I would have liked to have had him, I think, more so just to get rid of Ubaldo. But in terms of him coming to the Orioles, it seems like he would just be cluttering an already cluttered outfield.
Yeah, that's how I kind of feel. Like he would have been a Rickert replacement, maybe, kind of.
Yeah.
But that we don't really need that. I'd rather see Kim every day right now.
Yeah.
See how he goes. The idea of getting rid of Ubaldo to free up some space in that bullpen and some allow them to make some moves is definitely appealing. But now we're hearing Ubaldo might get the start on Thursday. So
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, it's clearly that they want Gausman to pitch against the Blue Jays.
Yeah,
and they don't want that way. They're not going to make Gausman travel to Minnesota for one of these. It's the second time we got to do this where we got to fly somewhere for one game.
Yep. Yeah, and I figure if Ubaldo has to start against anybody, might as well be the worst team in the American League.
Yeah, and why not give him one more chance to pitch, and maybe another team say, "Hey, he can pitch."
Yeah. One more shot to see if he's trade worthy. I was shocked that even the Padres were going to give him a shot. Like that just seemed like a uneven trade.
See, I'm not shocked because what do you think the Orioles' reputation is for pitchers? It's got to be horrible, and it's got to be. We're seeing Arrieta, Gonzalez go and get fixed. Pedro Strop is contributing to the Cubs. Johnson's down in Atlanta pitching all right. Bud Norris is pitching well. I mean, look at all these former Orioles that do okay when they leave this organization.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you, but it seems it seems like the Padres might be willing to take a shot because former Oriole pitchers seem to thrive on other teams, but they'd be giving up Melvin Upton, BJ Upton, whatever you want to call him, in exchange. That just didn't seem to even out. I think and for one thing, we would have gotten Upton for next year as well, right? I believe it was a 2-year. He's still under contract for 2 years.
Yeah, he's a yes. He's a
so
it's the same as Ubaldo. Well, the one rumor that came out on Twitter today was that the deal was about to close, and then because of finances, Angelos got involved and said no.
Interesting.
Which is interesting and tells you that maybe we would have had to eat a good chunk of Jimenez's contract.
Yeah.
I don't know. I never like seeing Angelos involved in anything. But
I don't either. And it seems out of at least his character recently, because he has gotten a little more
hands off.
Yeah, and a little more easy with the wallet recently. I mean, Chris Davis is the prime example.
Right.
But maybe it might be partially because he did open up the wallet pretty significantly for Ubaldo, at least in terms of for the Orioles. Like, when's the last time we ever paid $40 million for a starting pitcher? Even he wasn't a very good one, he was the best available at the time. It is kind of a hard pill to swallow, knowing that you spent that much for a guy that has contributed virtually nothing.
Right. Yeah. Do you think the Orioles? We've got a week till the trade deadline. You think the Orioles are going to do anything? Yeah, Duquette has made a move in either June or July every year he's been in Baltimore.
Yeah, he has. Nothing has been as splashy as since Andrew Miller for Eduardo Rodriguez.
Well, that's the only one that worked, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I don't anticipate any big names coming here or us losing any big names. I would expect a move, but it might just be for some fifth starter off of some team that we never heard of. But yet, when the trade occurs, we can all pretend like we knew it was a good move.
like Hellickson from the Philadelphia.
Yes, that's the one I have seen
or
floated around a little bit.
That Santiago guy.
Yep.
That I don't know. He's on the West Coast, and people keep telling me.
Or Irvin Santana in Minnesota.
Right. So I don't know. I don't know if we even need to make a move. Now, yes, I'm saying this when all of our starters have a combined ERA of the past week of under 2.
Yes.
So ask me again next week, and I'll be begging for a pitcher. But as of right now, this team looks okay.
Yeah. Just last Tuesday, we would have been begging for a starting pitcher, but this Tuesday, it's a completely different story.
Right. And right now, as we said at the beginning of the program, we are 1 game behind the Cubs for the best record in baseball, and that's not just because of this week. That is because of whatever 90 games that we're in right now.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and the Red Sox have now lost 2 in a row to the Minnesota Twins, who are terrible. The Blue Jays just keep winning, but they just got to be frustrated because they still haven't been able to pass the Red Sox. But they're right on our heels. We cannot get comfortable yet. We still got 2 months of heavy races in the American League East.
Yeah, it's 2.5 and 3.5 game lead as we record this. We just beat Cleveland and just swept them, who are a very good team. But you're right. This playoff scenario is looking like there are going to be 3 AL East teams in the playoffs. 1 that gets in and 2 that play for the wild card spots.
Yeah, that is quite possible.
So, which means it's very important to play really well up in Toronto this weekend.
Yes, I forgot it's in Toronto this weekend.
It's in Toronto.
We have been able to catch the ball games down here when we're home at the house because the television has an Apple TV with an MLB subscription. So I got to watch the whole game yesterday. And even the ones while I'm at the park, I've got my phone on my hip. Even the game on Sunday, the one you were at, I even tweeted how hot it was in Florida at Epcot that day. But I know it was hotter in Baltimore than it was at Walt Disney World that day. It was insane. But even that was a Sunday afternoon. I was sitting down in Japan, of all places, when Reimold hit that walk-off home run. It was great.
World traveler.
I am, yep. 2 minutes later, I was in Italy. It's crazy.
Yeah, now, if only they could make real transportation work that fast.
One day, Josh. Maybe our grandchildren will be able to do that.
Yeah. So the theme of today's episode is kind of how you became an Oriole fan. And I'll share my story in a little bit, but do you want to share a little bit about how you became an Oriole fan before I get you off the phone?
Sure, and I bet mine is very much like yours, very, very much like anybody else who's contributing to today's episode, where it was born, it must have been in my blood. My father, my grandfather, all of my ancestors on both sides of my family all came up through Baltimore. Nobody has been displaced from Chicago or anything like that. We've been Orioles fans in the Rohde family for generations now. And even as a child, just playing Little League and growing to have a love of baseball, my parents pulling me and my brother out of school on opening day so we could attend opening day for a few years there as second, third, fourth graders, collecting baseball cards. There was always a stretch where, as a baseball fan, I appreciated baseball altogether. Whether I loved Ken Griffey Jr. or Don Mattingly. The list is massive of all the baseball players I admired as a kid, but number one was always the home team, always the Orioles. And that's how it's been for me my whole life. I don't know anything different, and honestly, I don't want to know anything different.
So you assume that everyone has that same story, and mine is similar, because you and I grew up in the same area and kind of grew up together, same type of parents. That, but we've got like how many stories? We got like 4, 5, 6 stories coming up, and they're all different. But the one thing that every story has in common is family or community. Whether it's the community they grew up in or the fact that like this new like Twitter online Oriole fan social media community that's built.
Cool.
So
good. I'll look forward to listening to that.
Yeah. So we're gonna get to all those stories now, and I'll let you go to the village. Baseball and the Orioles is easily my first love. Yeah, I fell in love with baseball way before I even cared about a girl. And it was something that it's what me and Matt and our friends did. We played baseball. We listened to the Orioles on the radio. We went to baseball games. We talked baseball. And every time I'm saying baseball now, it's really the Orioles. And it was the Cal Ripken. And I fell in love. If I had to point to a year, it would be 1989. And that why not season and that team, because I was 9 years old. And 9 years old seemed like the perfect time to really fall in love with baseball and understand what was going on. And I'll never forget that team because of that. I'll never forget Steve Finley hurting his arm in opening day, I believe, when he ran into the wall to catch it. And Pete Harnish stepping on a nail in Toronto as we were making our way towards the postseason and having to miss a start and wondering how much that affected that team. And we will always cherish that why not 1989 highlight video because that season meant so much to me as a child. And I fell in love with the Orioles because it was passed down from generation. Later in the show, we're going to get to my dad. In fact, I think we'll get to him right after me, and I'll start it off with him because he's the oldest person we could find to do this interview. And why not hear where he learned it from, because he is who ingrained baseball into me. I remember during the rough years when the Orioles were not doing well, I would have friends sometimes make comments about coming over to my home, and the question would be, did the Orioles win or lose? Because whether they won or lost was the atmosphere that was in my home growing up. It truly affected the attitude of my family and the tone in the household. That we would all be a little bitter and upset if the Orioles lost in another stupid way when they should be winning baseball games. And before that, I remember growing up, and when HTS first came out, if you remember, you had to pay extra for it. We couldn't pay the extra money for it. So my dad had some weird way that he would press like the tracking button, and it would get move the lines off the scramble enough that you could see a nice black and white picture. No sound, but we had a black and white picture. So I could watch the black and white Oriole games with the radio next to the TV and listen. And I watched a lot of Oriole games that way. And eventually we were able to get HTS and then Masson, of course. But I remember watching games on that little black and white TV. It was a color TV, but the black and white image. I remember going outside and pretending to be those baseball stars. And I remember listening to games on the radio. And my dad taking me to Memorial Stadium and sitting in the bleachers and getting the gigantic sodas that were way bigger than I should have had as a little child. And I just remember that being my start and that being the moment where the Orioles became an important part of my life. And you see, I lead off with family, and it's been passed on to me by family. And that's what all of these stories you'll see. There's a common thread of community and family and how wonderful it is to have that stuff. So I'm going to let the rest of these people introduce themselves first. And you know what? We're not going to go with my dad right now. We'll get to him later. Right now, we're going to go to JT for a little different story.
Yeah, so I'm JT. I'm from the thriving metropolis of Toledo, Ohio, which I think is going to separate me from a lot of the Orioles fan base. Not a large orange and black contingent in Northwest Ohio. I went to Chicago, the University of Chicago, for college, and now I'm at Notre Dame Law School. None of those things particularly closer to Baltimore at all. So, you know, it's. I think there's obviously a difference between being an Orioles expat, a Baltimore expat, and being someone who's never really lived in the city at all. But my dad and I, notwithstanding, are passionate Orioles fans. My dad, growing up, was in a pretty standard Midwest middle-class family, and you know, they didn't do a lot of exotic vacations, but a lot of the vacations they took were to his aunt and uncle's house in Joppa, Maryland, and it's a 8-hour drive to the Baltimore suburbs from Toledo to Joppa. And, you know, every summer they went out there. My dad went to a lot of Orioles fans, and he fell in love with that team when he was growing up. And, you know, when I was younger, he passed it on to me. In our, you know, local Springfield Little League games, we were always the Orioles. I have a large collection of hats that don't fit anymore from the Golden Age days where we won back-to-back league titles. But that's the thing, is growing up, you know, I had no real connection to the team before Twitter, before Reddit, before, you know, the podcast networks. The Orioles were really a logo on a shirt in a box score. So I think, like a lot of fans, I came back to the team when they were good again. But it wasn't just that they were good; it's that I had the means to kind of get involved with other fans. You know, growing up on an island, it's not as if I could go down and watch the game on the bar because the Orioles were never on TV. So I, you know, when things turned around in 2012, the combination of all the social media and, you know, MLB TV allowed me to kind of rediscover that fandom that my dad had growing up, and now it's a thing we talk about on the phone every night. The sense of community is huge, because that's what sports is. You know, going down to Camden Yards ideally is hanging out with 40,000 of your closest friends. But, you know, we only do that once a year. And it's not as if we have those connections to local fans when I'm in Toledo or Chicago or South Bend, Indiana. But, you know, a friend of mine, my friend Sarah, introduced me to MLB TV in 2012. And then, you know, I started picking up the Orioles podcast, you know, first Camden Chat and then the Baltimore Sports Report Network, you know, you guys, Birds Eye View, Baltimoreans, et cetera. And, you know, through Twitter in particular, suddenly it feels like an Orioles family. And I think sharing the experience of sports is what we value most about it, right? Yeah, sports is a story of families, of fathers and sons, of best friends getting a beer and watching the game. And, you know, be it slightly different with an ain't the beer cold tweet, that experience is now communal. And that is principally through podcasts and Twitter is how we, my dad and I, really came to love the Orioles all the more all over again.
So I actually grew up in Washington from the age of like 10, well, my story dates a little bit further back than that. So my dad grew up in Washington. My dad was a huge, you know, lifelong Senators fan, basically, and when we moved back to DC when I was 10, there were of course, well, not of course, I was, you know, I'm 42 now, so there were no Senators then. So we basically adopted the Orioles. And for me, being a kid, you know, that sort of became my baseball team. For my dad, mostly, I think it was a holding place, basically, until his baseball team came back. But that was okay. So living in D.C., we used to drive up to Memorial Stadium, go to baseball games. When I was in college, we actually went down to spring training when the Orioles were, I guess, on the other side of Florida. I can't, you know, near where the shuttles launched from. And so we actually saw Cal Ripken in spring training one year. my dad is sort of a baseball fan of any, he loves all baseball. So anyway, I just became an Orioles fan. I went away to college at a time where, frankly, it was, 1991, where there was no internet. So it was kind of, hard to follow a team from afar. But in any event, so I went away for college and then another year. And in 1996, I actually moved to Baltimore to go to law school. And, of course, 1996 was a very good time to be an Orioles fan. And also a very good time to live 3 blocks from Camden Yards, which is what I did. So I was in law school at the University of Maryland, and I lived, just walking distance from the ballpark. And, of course, all of our favorites played for those teams, Cal and Brady and Alomar and et cetera, et cetera. And when I was in law school, and at the time, the ticketing rules about baseball games were much more relaxed than they are now. And you could actually go back into Camden Yards on someone else's ticket stub. So, like, if someone else was leaving and you took their ticket stub, there was no, I don't even think you can go in now. But there was no hand stamping. You just had to show them a ticket stub. It was pre-9/11. It was obviously a different world. So I lived 3 blocks, and so as with any baseball game, people leave in the middle, and I would just sometimes take a walk in the middle of baseball games and find people who were leaving and take their ticket stubs, and I would just go to Camden Yards, in 96 through 97, and watched a ton of baseball games without paying, and because I was by myself and the ushers didn't care, I basically sat wherever I want. So I used to just go sit behind the Orioles dugout and watch what was then, a great baseball team, and really fun. And so that's how I sort of became an Orioles fan. I was, kind of a fan from being a young girl, but then in the mid-90s, I lived kind of lived at the ballpark my first summer in Baltimore, and the rest is history, as they say.
So you learned how fell in love with the Orioles from your dad, and now you're passing it to your boys. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's just great. It's a very different story for them, right? I mean, they really are just tried and true Baltimoreans. They were born at Sinai Hospital. They are, they grew up with the Orioles and the Ravens, and that's like the only thing that they know. And I think we really are trying to make it sort of we try and make it kind of a family thing, which is, we go to a lot of games, we watch, a lot of games on television or listen to on the radio together. We try and go to spring training as often as we can. And it's for us, it's like a family. My husband's actually not from here either, although he also moved to Baltimore at the same time I did. We met in law school. So he became an Orioles fan, although not quite as diehard as I was, about the same time I did. And, we're just trying to, I think it's such a great thing for them to sort of have that to kind of anchor them in their lives. And it really, I think, ties them to a community in a way that's really hard to find nowadays. I mean, I think we're finding communities like that are, they're few and far between now. And, when we go places, they talk to people who are wearing Orioles shirts. They went to summer camp this year, and they were, talking about friends they made who are Orioles fans. And, it's just, it's a bonding sort of mechanism, both for us internally as a family, but then also, I think, in kind of a broader sense. And you definitely see that among them and their friends who are Orioles fans too. They have friends who know they're big Orioles fans, and when they have an extra ticket, they they invite them along, and vice versa. We do the same thing. So that's really nice. And as much as I love football and I love the Ravens, baseball is more accessible in terms of being able to go to the ballpark kind of on a whim, and it being more reasonably priced and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's kind of nice for them too, which is that, their ability to kind of access, I don't want to say access the players, but have some feel some personal connection to them. They do have sort of moments where, Manny Machado threw me a baseball, right before the game or whatever. I feel like baseball is unique in that way, that you can make these, the players obviously don't feel that connection in the way that we as fans do, in terms of one-on-one. But I think they do kind of feel that with baseball, and I think that connects them to the community too. And they really do sort of, have that adoration for them.
Hi, this is John Soroka, and I've been asked to talk about how I became an Oriole fan. And I guess you really have to go back a good number of years. I grew up in Baltimore City in a housing co-op, in fact, Armstead Gardens, for some of you who may know that. My dad was almost 40 years difference in age than I was when I was born, and yet he instilled in me a love for baseball, and that's where I got it from. We would play catch every night practically in the spring and summer. And then as I got older, he would take me to a field, and we just he'd hit fly balls and I would catch them. And so the love of baseball was there. And then certainly growing up in Baltimore, it was very, very exciting in mid-'60s when the Orioles got Frank Robinson. I went to my first game. My first game ever was the game in which Frank Robinson on May 8th of 66 knocked the ball out of the stadium against Louis Tiant in Cleveland. And I fell in love with the Orioles from there on out. Got to go to not as many games as we go to now, but certainly probably throughout the year going to Memorial Stadium. And those were the days you could just walk up and get really good tickets. I still remember a couple of things. I think box seats, we never got box seats because they were too expensive, and they were $4. And it's hard to believe that $4 was a box seat, and not only was a box seat, but was a deal breaker for me and my dad to get them because we didn't have the money. But I can remember going to those games and going to some great games where the Orioles played in 66, and then 69, 70, 71. The Orioles were predominantly the best team in baseball during those 3 years. And my dad and I would go to those games. And so really my love of baseball was instilled by him. And I can still remember one night in particular, the Orioles were playing Chicago White Sox, and I was psyched about going. It was a Saturday. And Chicago White Sox had a great pitching team. There was a guy by the name, I think his name was Joe Horner. And I think he was pitching that Saturday, and it was like a real tough pennant race. And I was excited, and I downed, prior to the game, I downed 2 twisty donuts really quick, and I puked them up. And my dad assumed that I was getting the flu, and he didn't let me go to the game. And I share that story because you will never see me eat a twisty donut from that day forward. I mean, I'm repelled by twisty donuts because they stopped me from going to a great game that night. And I never had the flu. I just was a jerky kid who ate twisty donuts too fast for my intestines, apparently. And that's my story with that. And just throughout the years, my dad and I would go to games, and I fell in love with. Initially, we always sat on the first base side because the Orioles had a first baseman by the name of Jim Gentile. For some reason, I really liked him as a player. And then after that period of time, I really developed a fan relationship with Brooks Robinson. I thought he is still an amazing person character-wise, but an amazing third baseman. I still believe he's the best third baseman in the history of baseball. I watched him many times. You can't forget the World Series he had against Cincinnati when the world got to know how good he was at third. And so, when you grow up as a fan of that, every time you play anytime you play a pickup game, you want to grab third base because of the fact that Brooks Robinson was such an instrumental person to me growing up because he had the skills and he had the character. So that's really it in a nutshell of how I got to become a fan of Baltimore, basically through my dad. And the boys on the podcast mentioned my love for the Orioles and how that encouraged them. But really, it was my love, my dad's love affair first with baseball. He just loved the game. And think about it. It's the only sport where you have to get the opponent out. It's not based on time. And I love that factor that you got to get 27 outs in this game to win it if you're ahead. The time's not a factor. You can't hold on to the ball. You got to play, and you have to force those 27 outs no matter what. And, I know we're trying to speed up the game nowadays, and I understand that, but there's something remarkable about sitting, whether it be Old Memorial Stadium where it used to be or Camden Yards, and just taking in a game. I love doing that with my sons now. And you take in a game, you forget about everything else that's going on, and you just enjoy those couple of hours, realizing that the time factor is not going to kick in at all, that you have to get the outs of the other team in order to win the game. And I find baseball to be exciting from that perspective.
My name is Rob Feigley. I grew up in Baltimore. I've been a lifelong Orioles fan since certainly the day I can remember. It's kind of been instilled in me, even before I can remember. My grandfather was a huge baseball fan. He was very passionate. He was the kind of guy that would go and heckle umpires and the players until he got kicked out. His famous saying was, if you went to a game with him, he would say, "Did you bring the refrigerator?" And when you would look at him funny, he would say, "Well, I love to take a on it." That was what he was known for. So that was even before I can even remember. As I got a little older, my father started taking me to games. I was at game one of the 83 ALCS with my great uncle Bill, known as Pops Norland. When you think of the traditional guy that sits out on his porch on a hot summer night with a cigar and a cold beer and the radio on in the ball game, that was him. Many games watching with him, with Brooks and Chuck Thompson calling. So there's a lot of memories at Memorial Stadium. I went to the last 3 games at Memorial Stadium. Certainly a lot of emotional moments there, especially in the last game. And then when we get to the Camden Yards era, I did go to the Cal Ripken game, 21-31. I'd have to say I've been to a lot of sporting events, and that is probably always going to be number one for me. Not just baseball history, but some the world and life history there as well.
It's cool. So you're the third or fourth person I've talked to, and it's just cool to hear everyone's story is different. Yet we all grew up watching the same teams play. We all had different approaches and angles to it, so it's very cool.
Definitely. When I was a kid at Memorial Stadium, went to a game with my dad and a couple of my cousins, and we were standing outside waiting to get some autographs from the players. So I had a baseball, and I got it signed, and I kind of ran up to everybody. I was like, look, I got one. And they looked at it, and they're like, "Rob, this guy is not a player." And I still remember the guy's name to this day. It's one of the great mysteries of my life. I could ever figure out who he was. The baseball was signed Amos, quote, Killer Roberts. And I know that's not somebody that ever played for the Orioles. I've actually asked a few of the older players, Boog, Al Bunbury, when I've crossed paths with them, if they have any clue who this guy was, and nobody seems to know. I got made fun of that for years. I still do once in a while. So there's just a lot of good old-time memories. It certainly entails some of the best memories as a child. And, I've carried that anybody who follows me on Twitter or has been to a game with me or sees the way I post about things. It's just kind of been instilled in my blood to, be passionate and emotional about it. And said it's a different age and era now for sure, but I've carried that over into adulthood as well. Baltimore has a very, and certainly, it's been some rough times there recently, but there's a unique character. There's something very distinct about it. And, there's a tight community and family and values and people do care about and help each other. My birthday was Friday the 8th, and I was lucky enough to have gone to the ball game that night with about 25 to 30 family members. And, it was a great time. It was a perfect way to spend the birthday. Could have asked for a little bit of a better game, especially with the pitching, but between being there and seeing the 66 team come out before the game and get acknowledged on the 50th anniversary and then the fireworks afterwards, it was just a great time, and that's certainly going to be up there with the memories that I have of going to games. No question about it.
It's cool to hear people fall in love with the Orioles.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing about the Orioles is, they're the one team that has always been there. I've been around long enough to remember when the Colts left and, kind of the void that was in the middle there. And certainly, I never really thought that the Ravens would be able to replace them. But they most certainly have done that. It's kind of a generational thing. My dad, he loved the Colts, and he does love the Ravens as well. But for him, he says, it's still not exactly quite the same. I would think people in my generation probably feel that, it's matched, and certainly the younger generation doesn't really have the perspective of, having had the Colts. But the Orioles are the one team, that's been there since, I can absolutely remember. So there's definitely something special about that for sure.
All right. Well, my name is Brian, and my story is probably not like other people's because I'm an out-of-state Baltimore Orioles fan. Currently live in right outside Albany, New York. I grew up in the suburb of Albany in Baltimore. I have family, though, that was originally here, and they moved to Falls Church, Virginia. I want to say like right around the time or maybe a couple of years before I was born. And they all, settled down there, all got married down there. And my parents were not big sports fans whatsoever. So they had no sports following. My dad was not one of those dads that go out and play catch in the yard or, teach you the fundamentals of any sport whatsoever. So luckily I had this kid down the street. His name was Scott. And Scott was a big baseball fan. His brother was really good at baseball. His dad was a baseball coach. So I hang out with him. And I think about five or six, you start a little T-ball. And he was like, you should play T-ball this year. We can start, playing before so that way you don't feel like you're really bad and whatnot. So we started hanging out, and he always wore Orioles T-shirt. So, started collecting cards and stuff, and he's like, oh, let's go to, we had, at that time, it was the Albany County Yankees, which was AA for the New York Yankees. And he's like, oh, well, let's go to a game. And I had never been to a sporting event whatsoever. And, it was a small stadium, probably not even comparable to any of the single-A stadiums now, because all the single-A stadiums now actually generate some revenue and whatnot. I mean, not that they didn't, but and wouldn't you know, the manager of that 1989 team was Buck Showalter. That team ended up going like 92-48. They had a plus 189 run differential, and they were just breaking. And I went to a lot of games this year with them. But yeah, I do remember my first one because they gave out these baseball cards. So, you had a Buck Showalter baseball card at the time, Deion Sanders, Bernie Williams, Scott Kamenicki, Jim Leyritz. They all on the team. So you got all these, and the baseball cards are like the most cheesy baseball cards ever, like the ones that we used to get as kids would be like future all-star. One of Buck, I'll send it to you, is pretty priceless. I mean, there's no emotion in his face, as always. But we got that. And then, so I was like, I like this guy. We're going to hang out. I'm going to be an Orioles fan. Then, cousin got married to Steph, who was a huge Orioles fan, because back then, Falls Church, Virginia, there was one baseball team, Baltimore Orioles. There was no Washington Nationals. And so he, through the grapevine, my mom said, oh, yeah, Brian's becoming an Orioles fan. So he used to come up, and every time he'd come up, he would always bring me Oriole stuff. And then eventually, I got old enough, we went down there, and we would go to Orioles games. The only problem is, Jeff, the dark years were too much for Jeff. So Jeff has shifted. He is not only a Washington Nationals fan, he's a Washington Nationals season ticket holder. So definitely I give him crap for that, because I grew up in New York State. I had to go through the dark years when the New York Yankees were the best team for like 4 or 5 years, if not more. And I had to deal with that going to school with my Orioles stuff, because basically after 97, we all know what happened. It was downhill. It was terrible. Those were like the games that were on TV. The only time I really got to see the Orioles were when they played the Yankees or the Red Sox. And half the time, if not 90% of the time, they would lose. And all the games I went to at Yankee Stadium as a kid, they would always have the lead and then blow it in the ninth. I can't tell how many walk-offs I've seen in the dark years of, the Orioles being ahead like 6-0 and losing 7-6. So that's my story of an out-of-state Baltimore Orioles fan, still a fan. We share in common. Both your daughter's name is Camden. My son's name is Camden. And, we go down all the time.
Now, during all that time, how tempted were you to become a Yankee fan?
Say that again?
How tempted were you during those dark years to become a Yankee fan?
Never. I, with a passion, hated the Yankees. I hated the Yankees. And through 94, I watched their whole farm system. I watched Derek Jeter and Mariano Rivera and Jorge Posada. All those guys were on that Albany County Yankees team until the strike. And then evidently the Yankees wanted some more money to put into the stadium, because it was kind of dumpy. They only wanted like $1 million to put in the stadium, and they're like, no, we won't see a return on this, because early in the Yankees weren't good. So they made a huge mistake there, but never once was I even it wasn't even a question. I will never become a Yankees fan. I despise the Yankees. There's many times, even as a kid, I was like, the Yankees are ruining baseball, because when they don't have it through their farm system, which that was one thing I respected. I saw those guys come, I was like, all right, they have a legit farm system. When they started getting to the years where it was just buying Mike Messina, buying Randy Johnson, buying the A-Rods, the Chuck Knoblauchs, all that, I just couldn't stand that. So there's no way I could become a Yankees fan. And a lot of the guys I know actually, are Yankees fans. And of course, this year, we'll go out for beers every once in a while. I'll say, oh, yeah, you guys been watching a lot of games? They'll be like, no, I haven't watched any games this year. I go, funny how that is, because, remember that a couple of years ago when that's all you were talking about is watching the Yankees, and now that they're not doing well, you have to watch them? Dude, I went through 14 years of that. 2012, I remember I was saying, you know what, maybe we can be 500 this year. And then, obviously, a different story was told, but no, not once, never.
So how did you become an Oriole fan? That was a bunch of different stories, and we were all here at the same point, where we're all cheering on these birds, the first place birds. And it's all about community and family. And it's been amazing as social media has taken off, and Twitter, and I guess that's still social media, but the fact that we can now have this Oriole community online, because that's what it's about. That's what makes us fans. It's sure we all have this commonness, and sure the team plays well, and that helps a lot. And yeah, for most of us, our entire life it's been cheer for the black and orange. No matter who the players were, we might as well have been cheering for Laundry. But really, it's always been about community. It's been about being with family and cheering. It's why we love it when the stadium is full. And it's why we love to be on Twitter during the Oriole game, because we get to enjoy this great game of baseball together. Anyway, it's been another great show, and it's been one more week closer to when Matt and Bert get back in town, so you have that to look forward to. And when they come back in town, August 20th, we're all going to get together for Night at the Yard. And here's the details. August 20th. You may have seen it advertised a lot lately because it is a Crush Davis bobblehead day. So that's one thing you can get. Him and his dog Samson. Still haven't figured out if the dog's head bobbles so that we could have a bobble dog. But if you come early, you can get that. You can sit with us up in the cheap seats. And if you go on the Orioles website right now, you cannot get your tickets out for under $30. It's just not possible. So here's what we've got a deal. We jumped on this a long time ago. A few months ago, we actually reserved all these tickets. So here's the deal we got for you. Head on over to section336.com and you can get your ticket for $25. $25 and you get to join us in the cheap seats. Yeah, they're the cheap seats, but you're in the stadium. It should be a good crowd that night. We're playing the Houston Astros. You get to hang out with the community of Section 336. It'll be a great time. And we've also got a deal on there for t-shirts. If you don't have your Trumbo shirt yet, you can get that for a total of $40 for your shirt and ticket. That gives you the shirt and ticket shipped to your home for $40. It's a great deal. So head on over to section336.com, like you should regularly anyway, and go on over there and get your ticket for Night at the Yard. We've got 50 tickets, so I'm pretty sure they're going to go pretty fast, thanks to the Crush Davis bobblehead, especially if he starts hitting the ball again. Anyway, you can follow me on Twitter at Josh Soroka. You can continue to follow Bert at Bert Rohde and Matt at Section 336. You can even follow the intern, who I'll probably have back in here next week at WW Intern, and the show at Section 336 Show. And please give us some review on iTunes. Go on iTunes and make a review and tell Matt and Bert how great of a job I've been doing with them taking their summer off. And go ahead and like our Facebook page as well. Next week we'll be back in studio live on Tuesday night. And I believe it's E-Rock from Barstool next week. We've got guests over the next couple of weeks all in studio, so it'll be a lot of fun. Until then, I'll see you guys next week. Go Orioles.
Section 336 is an affiliate of 24/7 Networks. Find Section 336 on UtahStreetReport.com.